Happy Halloween, everybody. It's Ipswich versus Leicester. You know what I'm going to say, trick or treat. Welcome to the preview show on Blue Monday, an Ipswich Town podcast. Good evening, everybody. I think we might have lost a super chat in the comments there. See if you can find that, Richard. I just did see a super chat from Max in there that I can't see on my screen. There you go. I don't know why it's disappeared on my screen. Thank you, Max. Some positivity to start with, 3 points incoming. With that being said, Rich, welcome. How are you feeling?
Oh, I don't know, mate. I've been really busy this week and not had a huge amount of time to think about the game. And now I've had to do all the our usual nerdy insight ahead of Saturday. And it's massive, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's not, are we removing the must win from our vocabulary, our dictionary this evening?
Comment.
It's not must win just yet, but it's kind of really need to win, imperative that we're victorious at this stage, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm demonstrating my loyalty to the Goalkeepers Union with my 94 shirt and homage to Blue Monday Rewind. So yeah, I'm all good. How about you?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm not actually going to be there. I was intending to be there this round, but my missus' large birthday celebration involving a 4, if you get my drift, seems to now be going over the entire weekend. So I'm very, very chilled, and I'll be watching from afar with my fingers crossed for that 0 to disappear. Yeah, right. I think we're going to be at a zoo somewhere. So yeah, I'll
make
be
your own jokes up about that, folks.
I'll be tuned into football afterwards. But welcome everybody live here on YouTube. Get the debate moving. Get in the comments right now. If you're an old school audio listener, do come and join us each and every Thursday. It's normally Rich and Seb. Seb's not around tonight, so I am standing in. What I need you to do, though, in the comments now, guys, I need to see that comments filled with blue hearts, please. I want to see as many as possible in the chat because, Rich, we've got 2 members of the Ipswich Town family have passed away in, I think, one today possibly as well. And this past week, we're talking about Trevor Wymark, who you'll probably understand Richard and I are not going to talk about because David Diamond will be on the show on Sunday, and we'll get David, who's far better placed to talk about Trevor Wymark than Richard and I are. And well-known Town supporter Tom Tomalin also died last Friday evening. Is that right, Rich? Age
I think so.
54. I think we were talking about him before. I think everybody knows who he is, kind of home and away supporter. So don't worry about talking about Trevor Wymark, Rich, because we'll get Dave to do that. But just a word on Tom and maybe a little tribute from yourself.
Yeah, and there's a few of us out there. Well, there's not too many of Tom's kind of level of loyalty and commitment to the cause out there. You know, with the fact that players have taken their time to pay tribute, Matt Holland, Adam Tanner, Kev Ellis in our Telegram group as well. The fact that they know and love Tom because he followed the club home and away for years and years, you know, despite of physical disability and needing a wheelchair, just followed the club just so
at the time,
passionately.
probably, Rich, when it was a lot harder to follow with a disability than it is now. Not as easy now, right?
Really grotty, away ends. I suspect he had to deal with all of those kind of challenges, but just Ipswich Town through and through. And yeah, the outpouring of support, gratitude, love for his support of the club. And what a great character he was as well. Lovely person. I'd engaged with him a few times on social media. Never got to have a chat with him. He was going to come to a few Blue Monday events, and I think was going to quite recently come to the supporters AGM as well, but just couldn't make the logistics work. And obviously ill health as well didn't help either. But a really lovely guy, and yeah, someone that people will be of a certain vintage will be absolutely familiar with, and really sad to hear of his passing. And I think we're all expecting the club to mark it in some way on Saturday, which is very much deserved as well. So yeah, Tom, and obviously his family and friends, we're thinking of you here at Blue Monday, I'm sure. And yeah, as you say, Trevor Wymark as well, not someone that an era before you and I started watching, but we'll do a few bits and pieces. I think you guys did a player profile back in the day, didn't you?
I can't take any credit for that. That was literally all day.
Yeah. So I think we've got a mini little a player profile that Dave did kind of right at the start of the podcast. We'll put that out tomorrow if we can, and then we'll get Dave to wax lyrical about how much he loves Trevor Wymark, and I'm sure there's others out there who remember his goals for the town as well. So yeah, a sad few days.
Yeah, very, very much so. And thank you, everybody. If you are listening on audio, do go and check out some lovely tributes here on YouTube. Thank you for all of those down there. And forgive me for a clanging transition after something quite poignant, but do keep the debate going. Hit the thumbs up button, and do try and join us on YouTube for these live shows each and every time we're on live on Thursday and Sunday. Ipswich women, Rich, do you want to catch us up?
Yeah, I mean, poor Milton Keynes women who got battered 13-0 at Felixstowe on Sunday have to make the return trip back down the A14 to face us in the FA Women's Cup. So that kicks off for ITFC women this weekend. I think season ticket holders have to get a ticket. Everyone has to get a ticket. You can do so in advance via the ticket website or pay on the gate. And then 1 p.m. kickoff is well important to know. It's a slightly earlier kickoff. But yeah, ITFC women have got a great track record of making it pretty far in this competition. Some exciting exploits, a few giant kills, including last season against Lewis that I remember fondly. So yeah, really excited to see the start of that. Hopefully a cup run again, and get down to Felixstowe and get your Sunday football fix.
There you go. And your Saturday football fix will be Ipswich Town versus Leicester City. We'll get into the nitty gritty of this, Richard, but I think, maybe before the season, expectations were slightly different than they are now. I think that's fair to say for everybody. We were kind of assuming the best case scenario. But I think there was a bit of a sense that, we'll be competitive with Leicester because, A, we thought they were going to get a points deduction, i.e. 6 probably points deducted. We knew there was a bit of financial issues, which obviously resulted in, Keane and Dewsbury Hall being sold, potentially their best player there. I know they managed to sign Fatawu, which we'll get onto him. And they lost their manager as well. But here we are, and we find ourselves, and we're going to talk about recording back-to-back victories, 5 points behind Leicester. And people get very cross with me about everything being too early. Everything I say is too early, Rich. But Leicester, if they win this game, will be 8 points ahead of us. And given the speed things move at the bottom of the Premier League table, could be decisive. Could also be decisive if we close the gap up to 2 points. But what's just your kind of bird's eye view of the kind of Ipswich-Leicester rivalry this season, and how important we thought it was going to be and how important it actually is?
Yeah, I mean, until we get into the kind of meat of the season, the teams that get promoted with you are the ones that you've got your crosshairs on, isn't it? And the points need to be picked up. Certainly, at least a draw away from home and a win at home if you stand any chance of trying to stay in the division. And you're right, there were so many aspects around the Leicester situation, particularly off the field, where you kind of felt maybe we've nudged ahead, maybe we're actually in a better position than them. But they've recruited really well. It's worth noting that we are live just an hour or so after the club have put an interview out with Mark Ashton and Kieran McKenna. And Mark Ashton talks about his frustration at how FFP, EPP, FPR, whatever it is, hasn't been enforced, because it makes life so much more difficult. And of course, you can't bank on points deductions as a route for survival, but it was we were talking pretty openly about it and needing to finish above 3 other teams. And however you did that, whether that was points deductions or not, that was the job at hand. And now it's all the more difficult. And as we'll talk about, great players in there, and they've got that Premier League experience, Ben. They've got parachute payments still going back a few seasons as well. So when you look at things now, you kind of think maybe Leicester are back ahead of us. And yeah, it makes Saturday all the more important to claw them back to your points gap and assessment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would have said close season. Most optimism was on us rather than Leicester. But I remember it being discussed in our Telegram group, and maybe that's changed now because Maresca's doing quite well at Chelsea, but he does have Cole Palmer, so it's hard to judge, isn't it? In that when you've got potentially the hottest player in the league. But there was an idea that they'd actually traded up in terms of their manager, replacing Maresca with Cooper.
Yeah, there's obviously a little bit of history there with the Nottingham Forest connections, which appears to have been overlooked and will continue to be overlooked whilst he's successful there. But yeah, I mean, I think all of us thought if you had a choice of, if you're Chelsea or Man United, of McKenna versus Maresca, you go McKenna. So it is weird to see how that's played out. And Chelsea doing much better than people think as well. But yeah, Steve Cooper has done it once with Forest, hasn't he? So how's that going for him? Mitigating circumstances, not exactly popular. We'll talk. You've got a little bit more knowledge on Steve Cooper than I do, but certainly the ends of his tenures at both Swansea and Forest, the fans weren't necessarily on side, and you know, maybe he's learned from that. Who knows? We'll talk about the style of play. I was surprised to see how they're quite low possession, but high percentage of short passes versus direct balls. So maybe he's had to evolve slowly from the Maresca ball, which was very much the patient build-up. We saw that twice, didn't we, last season? So it is really nicely poised, interestingly poised. But as we say, probably, well, league table, Leicester are 15th, aren't they? And they're 5 points better off. So having the better of it over the two clubs.
Where do you want to start then, mate? Do you want to kind of dive in, or do you want me to give you my take on Steve Cooper off the bat?
Let's go with Steve Cooper because it's probably the interesting one, particularly off the back of that 3-1 defeat. Well, I think I've got information about the Man United League Cup defeat, but frankly, it's irrelevant because they made 9 changes. Only 2 of the usual starters featured. So I think we can disregard that situation. But yeah, last time out, I guess Steve Cooper would have been wanting to get one over on Forest, and Chris Wood had other ideas. But yeah, what's your take on his kind of stature and style of play? Because very highly rated young coach, wasn't he? And yeah, he's done well at Forest, I guess. But it went sour at the end, didn't it?
I think he's really good. And I remember having a chat with Craig on one of the preseason shows when we were terribly worried about Kieran McKenna possibly leaving the club. And we were kind of thinking, who can match McKenna's promotion from the Championship to the Premier League and also add having kept up a team in testing circumstances. His name came up. I'm really interested. I mean, you're right about, possible sort of, I don't know, less than satisfactory endings. Steve Cooper's not like a media guy. Do you know what I mean? He's not charismatic and obviously is in front of the players, but do you know what I mean? So I think once the on-pitch stuff tails off a little bit, there's nothing outside of it, charisma. Right. Like we had Paul Lambert, who, whatever you say about, was all charisma and no substance on the pitch. Whereas, this is a little bit the other way around with Steve Cooper. So I think that kind of lets him down in terms of how he presents himself. But yeah, real proper, very much in McKenna's ilk in terms of, I know the styles of play are pretty different, but in terms of this career coach that's kind of come through, I suppose in McKenna's CV, it's at big clubs like Spurs and Man United, whereas with Stevie Cooper, it's with the England representative teams. Did a good job at Swansea, and it was one of those be careful what you wish for things, where they were like, this is a bit pragmatic. We don't like finishing the playoffs, and look where Swansea have been. I know the parachute payments ran out, and I think McKenna's achievement was greater in going back-to-back promotions, but what Cooper did at Forest, I think they won. If someone can check me in the chat, I think they had like 1 point from the first 8 games or something when they took over, and
they were bottom.
Yeah, and he basically immediately put them into automatic promotion form for the entire rest of the season, won the playoffs, and then kept them up. and I'm sure you've all seen this stat doing the rounds, guys. I think it might have been in our Telegram group as well. 22 new players came in at Forest in that first transfer window. Forest played a couple of weeks ago. There was one player on the pitch of those 22, and it was Dean Henderson playing for Crystal Palace against them. So I think Cooper's really good. And my kind of comeback to your dodgy sort of end is I think it's just all on the pitch and no charisma. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe there's a lack of the PR stuff, and frankly, that's to be lauded. Actually, you know, I think we've experienced the wrong end of managers giving it the big one on in interviews and stuff, and being a little bit disingenuous. And you're right, the pedigree. You know, one of the youngest coaches to ever get the UEFA Pro license. I think he was 27 when he got that, and he won the under-17s World Cup with England as well, didn't he? So
yeah, Foden and Hudson-Odoi and some really good players.
Yeah. So you know the raw ingredients are there, and yeah, that the Forest situation. You know, a lot of money spent, as you said, and maybe Swansea similar. Their expectations just out of kilter, but it did end with 1 win in 13 at Forest. I guess we need to remember that they'd have a bit of negative momentum, didn't they, and turned it around. But you know, for Leicester, you know, he's been through those dogfights. That second season with Forest, keeping them up, huge experience, and that's something that both Southampton and Ipswich lack. So maybe Leicester.
Rich, he knows how to win a home game in the Premier League 1-0.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we saw that with the Bournemouth game, didn't we? And you know, the Southampton, the 3-2 last minute win. There was some circumstances, the red card to Ryan Fraser and stuff like that. But yeah, there is some pragmatism in there, and I think he talked today quite well about. He was asked about which players are going to be fit and ready, and sort of said, "Well, I'll pick the team that's suitable for the job." And a 0-0, a boring 0-0 at Portman Road, I don't think he's going to have any problem with at all. If he can sneak a cheeky 1-0, even better. So yeah, we need to. I think it's about what we can do really, because I think Leicester will probably counter us, won't they? They'll let us have the ball and then break with the pace as we know they had last season, and that'll be right up Stevie Cooper's street, won't it? So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we do really more maybe than Leicester, because we know all about them, don't we? And particularly Vardy's top scorer, four goals. Wilfred Ndidi's top assist maker, 4 assists, the 4th highest in the division. They've got 3 players on 2. Scoring goals isn't really a challenge for them, and then you add into the mix Facundo Bonanete, who's starring for them as well on loan from Brighton. So it's a good combination he's got there.
Yeah, very much so. Do you want to kind of do a little bit of just a sweep across Leicester then? Because I can see the chat is very keen to get onto what we're going to do, but we got to look. We got to look at Leicester. We got to look at both teams here. But do you want to do the tail of the tape then, Rich?
Yeah, if I give we said 15th in the league, 5 points ahead of the bottom 3, -4 goal difference. They are scoring, but they are conceding as well. No real surprise there. I mentioned last time out the defeats to Steve Cooper's old side, Nottingham Forest, Ryan Yates, and then Jamie Vardy equalised, and then 2 quite different finishes from Chris Wood, the kind of pivot and shot from the edge of the box and the looping header over the top of Hermansen. So I think all in all, the balance of play was quite interesting, Ben. Clear-cut chances, Forest had the better of it. But possession, Leicester had 64% possession in that game against Forest. So did Nuno Espirito Santo out Steve Cooper?
Two sides who didn't want the ball, right?
Maybe so.
Only one of them can play at home, yeah, Rich?
Yeah, well, exactly right. And but yeah, you kind of take Chris Wood out of the mix. Maybe that game evens itself out and becomes a 1-1 draw. Who knows? We know all about last season. Obviously, first in the Championship, won the league by 1 point from Ipswich with 13 goals better goal difference. Top scorer Vardy, where again we didn't see too much of him in the games against us, but 18 goals in the league, 20 in all competitions. Steffi Mavididi had a great season as well. Dewsbury Hall, we kind of talked about him, maybe kind of peaked quite early in the season and didn't maintain the level, or maybe got marked out of matches, but still got 14 assists. Abdul Fatawa as well, 13 assists. 97 points across 46 games. Typically good to storm the division, but it was a freak season, as we know, and they obviously got an FA Cup quarter-final in the mix as well. But history is pretty mixed. We've definitely commend the Blue Monday Rewind show. The guys managed to squeeze in 3 games against Leicester at home in the Premier League era, all of which quite positive. So if you're looking for an uplift ahead of the game, I recommend that. But yeah, last time out, Ben, we could talk about the home game, because I think that was quite weird, wasn't it? In terms of Leicester dominating the ball, chance after chance after chance not taken. And then Morsey rocks up with a deflected chance. But obviously last time we faced each other was at Leicester, and Sarmiento doing what Sarmiento did last season. Do you remember much about that game apart from...
I was at both of those games.
Were you?
Yeah, and they were both a bit of a microcosm of the season, really, because from a Leicester point of view, they kind of had the quality and they had the ball and they had the chances to win the game. But there was this kind of, I know it sounds churlish when Leicester scored 97 points, but there was this kind of sense that they had another gear, didn't they? And that never quite reached it. Except for that game against Southampton when they beat them 5-0 and Fatawu scored a hat-trick where they absolutely just buried Southampton, who, go figure, wanted to knock the ball around and play football against them. But yeah, we just last season had that fighting spirit, that fight till the end. And I know the Leicester fans, and God, we had the debate, didn't we, about deflected goals or late goals. And, you know, I'm sure we're all very, very, very bored of that. The Sunderland fans have got all of that in the Championship right now. They're lucky old Sunderland now, yeah, who just happen to be top and 5 points clear. How about that? There's a correlation here, isn't there? But no, we could have lost both of those games, couldn't we?
Yeah,
and
quite easily as well.
You remember the home game, and 2 other things happened. There was a big penalty shout as well for Dewsbury Hall at 1-0 Leicester. And also George Hurst got injured. Yes. It was actually one of the most significant games, because it was probably that game where they left the stadium and went and looked up Kiefer Moore's phone number, probably, wasn't it? So, yeah, really, really fascinating. But we played them quite close together, didn't we? One was Boxing Day, wasn't it? 27th
either side of Christmas, yeah.
And then mid-January. And I remember going there and thinking, crikey, we've had our worst injury crisis here. We've got players out and we've not lost to Leicester in these 2 games. But, Rich, it's a different manager now and a different style. So, and there's no Dewsbury Hall, as you mentioned, who was very sort of key to that game. And a lot of the guys in the chat are suggesting that Fatawu might not be around. So as much as I want to drill into those games, are they as relevant as they could be?
No, I don't think... I mention it because it's usual format here for Seb and I, but you're right. I mean, a lot of the personnel are the same, and due to some injuries and rotation, it might be quite a familiar looking team. So we'll come on to that later. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I still think there's some of the legacy of Maresca. It's such a cliche, isn't it?
They can't not be, Rich, can they?
Yeah. So I think there is still some stuff that will be familiar. But yeah, I do think it's worth remembering some... I think they were big draws, big points. Certainly at that time, we were struggling to win matches, weren't we? We'd had the Norwich defeat, and then QPR as well was a really grotty game in between, I think, over Christmas and New Year and stuff. And yeah, I think those points against Leicester kept our optimism high, didn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas draws to QPR were very much not buttering any parsnips. So yeah, you're right. I think I'm clutching a little bit for stuff there, but unbeaten and a pretty good record at Portman Road. And someone somewhere in the chat, Rob, asked about snow. Maybe we need to get Roy Keane in the dugout, perhaps, for that one, and make sure it goes ahead. But we got a good record. You remember, was it 6-0 home win over Leicester in 2002? I think Fanidi scored in that one. Matt Allen scored a couple. We just got relegated.
I think it was 6-1. I think Scully played. Well, Scully played for Leicester, didn't he? And hit the bar as well.
And we all thought we're going to storm this league, and little did we know. Moving things back to kind of current times, let's talk about ins and outs then. We talked about Dewsbury Hall to Chelsea for a really chunky, 30 million odd, I think, is the fee.
Vital, given the timing of it, Rich, as well. We think if it was before the July the 1st.
Yeah, I don't know whether in typical Chelsea style they overpaid somewhat for him. I'm not sure he's quite a 30 million pound player and not really had too much impact. I'm not sure if he's been injured there or not, but good business by Leicester. Kalichi Iheanacho is a name that people will be familiar with. He left on a free transfer to Sevilla, and a couple of loans out, including Harry Suter and Tom Cannon, who's having an okay spell at Stoke, isn't it? But quite a lot of young players brought in, Ben, who are some are featuring and some are not. Oliver Skipp hasn't really established himself yet. Good chunky 20 million fee from Spurs. He's kind of competing with another ex-Spurs midfielder and Harry Winks to get the spot alongside Wilfred Ndidi. Bilal Al-Khanous, 18.5 million attacking midfielder. We've seen a lot of championship promoted, all the three promoted teams, spending big to maintain what they had. Us with Amari Hutchinson, Southampton with Flynn Downs and Jacob Harwood-Bellis. Have I got that right?
Taylor.
Right?
Taylor Harwood-Bellis.
Taywoods, thank you. Abdul Fattah is signing a permanent for them as well, about 50 million. Really important business for them as well. And Caleb Okoli, centre-back, signed for 12 million as well. Probably the marquee signing, low-key marquee signing though, Ben. Jordan Ayew, 32-year-old, 4.5 million from Palace. They got Bobby De Cordova-Reid as well, who's someone you probably bloody love from Bristol City and Fulham days. But Jordan Ayew is probably the type of player that we could do with as well as that kind of experienced Premier League player, pretty consistent, scores goals, creates as well if needs to. And maybe that's a bit of a game changer off the bench for them as well.
Oh, do you think Steve Cooper just thought, if I can't get Andre Ayew, who he loved at Swansea, I'm having Jordan Ayew instead? But I know what you mean about, that we kind of went for the Calvin Phillips type route, whereas they've gone for just the grizzled. I mean, God, how many Premier League games has he played? But looking down that list of signings and ins and outs, I can totally take your point why people probably thought, oh, Leicester have either treaded water from last season to this. Well, Ipswich have, and we've obviously as Ipswich fans had to explain this to a lot of outsider fans we had to sign a load of players, we go into the Premier League with League One players completely. You've got to build stars and, increase your asset base. But I can totally see your point that, maybe there's that feeling. Is it massively thrilling? I don't know. But to your point about getting wins, Bobby Reid knows the Premier League. Jordan Ayew knows the Premier League. Probably Ollie Skipp as well. He's currently in the Spurs team, knows the Premier League. And Buonanotte does seem a bit of a hot hand as a good low knee, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I think we were linked with Odsonne Edouard, who I'm not sure has featured too much, forward loan from Palace. So yeah, it's a good kind of spread of some experience, but yeah, though Skipp, El-Khanous, Fatawu, Okoli, all kind of sub 23 years old. So again, signing a similar mold to the type of players that we've been signing that I needed to grow value and maybe that are there for the championship if the worst were to happen. So smart recruitment. And as you say, if you can suddenly get a tune out of Buonanotte, then happy days, right? And that's kind of working for them. In terms of the style of play, what we've got is the usual kind of 4-2-3-1. No surprises. It's typical. But we'll try and we're starting. Seb's got this app, Tactical Pad, that we found and nicked from a Villa podcast that we're going to try and use. It is a 4-2-3-1. We'll talk about the team that we expect and who might be missing. But it is a bit of a hodgepodge, Ben. This is the average positions that they got to at Southampton away. And you can obviously see the wide players there. Buonanotte was done the right-hand side, has been playing as a 10, but was on the right-hand side. We expect him to be on the right-hand side on Saturday against Ipswich as well. Mavididi obviously taking a fairly familiar position down the left and the fullbacks pushing on, but there's a lot of concentration in the middle and actually quite narrow. I was watching the Nottingham Forest goals and in their defensive shape, they're really narrow, Ben, and it's a surprise because as an attacking in an attacking phase, they're quite wide and get the ball wide to the likes of Mavididi and Buonanotte, and it's interesting to see them so narrow, and that may be an opportunity for us depending on who we bring in. We'll debate about whether Clark or Smodic played on the left and Hutchinson or Burns down the right, but that might play in our thinking there, Ben. In terms of where people kind of progress around the pitch, no real surprises that Vardy's going to linger around the edge of the box, but look how high the fullback gets on the right-hand side. Apologies for those listening on podcast. We appreciate and love you, and apologies for a visual thing here, but we can describe it. Again, the real concentration of players, particularly on the right-hand side of defence, well, fast moving right over, Ndidi kind of tucking in, Winks, no real surprises, doesn't really move too far from the halfway line. But from an orthodox 4-2-3-1 in those two graphics, it has evolved to be something very different and very fluid. So I think in 2024, do we care about formations anymore? I'm not really sure we do. It kind of looks anything from well, that could be anything, frankly, but that to me looks like a 3-4-3. So
well,
who knows?
What it absolutely stinks of is counter-attacking, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
you have a big concentration in the middle and then some very wide players. And that was Stevie Cooper's whole thing at Forest. I was at the playoff game. They played 3 at the back, not 4-2-3-1, but it was Jed Spence and Brendan Johnson, then a load of like Ryan Yates, Jack Colback, that Scottish defender, McKenna, Worrell, big, powerful, win the ball back. And I think they had Keenan Davis up top as well. So they had 3 really good physical players and 2 really quick players in Johnson and Spence down the side. And can you put up the one with, there you go, with Pereira and Buonanotte wide, and it's pretty much exactly the same thing, isn't it? So yeah, we know what to expect, don't we? Of a sturdy, solid team. And you're totally right, Rich, that if they draw the game 0-0 and take us back to King Power for a home game, we'd be perfectly happy with that. And with the lead they've got over us, it does really kind of play into their hands to just sit and counter attack. And if it doesn't work, what's the worst that can happen? They're still 2 points ahead of us, and they've got a home game to play. Do you want to flip it across to us then, Rich?
Yeah, well, I can. There's a couple more bits and pieces I've got for you and Leicester before we move on to us.
Please.
I can give you some of the details of who we'd expect. We're shouting out. I'm trying to get the pronunciation right, but I'm not done it. There's a Premier League pronunciation video that is a really good reference, but Hamadson in goal for, I think it's Mods Hamadson is how we pronounce it. I might have got that wrong. 9 starts, 1 clean sheet, but second for goals prevented and second for saves per 90. He's having a really
save against Forest in the first half.
Unbelievable save, wasn't it?
Really good.
So
yeah.
He's having a really great campaign. I mean, not a huge amount he could have done for the Forest second goal, but the third one maybe came walking out and could have stayed put. James Justin as well, really good down the right-hand side, but can play both sides. 9 starts, 2 goals and an assist from the wide position there. But I think we'll shift over to left because they've got an injury to one of their summer signings from the summer. I forgot his name, Victor Christiansen, who has been playing at left back. So James Justin filling in there, and Ricardo Pereira, who featured pretty routinely for them last season at right back, came in recently, and I expect him to stay there. Wout Fast, we know all about him. 3rd for blocks per 90 in the Premier League.
He'll give you a goal. He'll give you a goal though, Wout Fast, won't he?
Bit slow, and does like to go for a bit of a wander as well. We know all about Winks, maybe Skip alongside Ndidi, and we've talked about the 4 assists for Ndidi. That's the 4th highest in the league. 9 starts and 2 goals for Steffi Mavididi on the left-hand side. It looks like there's a doubt about Fatawa, who's got a groin injury. They're doing a scan. There's a big question mark there. That would be really handy. But then you're moving Buonanotte with his 6 starts, 3 goals and 2 assists at 19, and probably more familiar down in that right-hand side position. So that doesn't massively weaken them. El Canouse might come in, one of the signings from the summer. And we need to talk about Jamie Vardy. Give me your 9 starts, 4 goals. He's 37 years old. He's nearing 500 Leicester appearances and 200 goals. What a talisman, what an icon he's been for the Premier League, but Leicester City, Ben.
Well, people get cross when we praise other teams' players, but if you can't praise a Premier League icon who's in the 100-goal club and has his fingerprints all over the greatest title win I think anyone's ever seen, I'm so surprised he's still here now. And dare I say, if there hadn't been financial issues, they'd have dropped a load of money on a striker and he'd just been coming in off the bench. But look, if you got to do what you got to do, and if you're going to be in a battle to stay up, and you can play a relatively defensive style, and you can leave what did you say was 37?
Yeah.
You can leave a 37-year-old who's just really smart, really clever, really experienced up in the box, then there's no one better than Vardy to do that. And someone said in the chat, yeah, I mean, there's no winning against Vardy, because if you ignore him, he'll generate the howser he needed to wind up the away supporters. Just the home supporters in this case. Just don't get involved with that man, because he'll take great delight in rubbing it in our faces. But no, he's been an incredible, like you say, iconic Premier League player. When he's finished, people will put him, particularly because of the title winning. What was it? 15-16 or 15-16 when he'll go down as a sort of Premier League icon. But let's hope he's not iconing on Saturday, Rich.
and he didn't score against us last season either, did he? So
well done.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I've jinxed him now. In terms of people missing, the chat has picked up on Steve Cooper picked up his third booking of the season, so he'll be watching from the stands. I don't think that does us any harm.
No, clever, tweaky manager. What did Harry used to say? Moving the chess pieces around the pitch. That's surely worth something, Rich, isn't it?
Yeah, and a nice comfy seat up in the West Stand. Other names that are missing, we talked about Christiansen, Hamza Chowdhury is a name that people might be familiar, quite a combative central midfield / right back. Patson Daka as well, spent good money on him. He won't be fit. So yeah, I think there's some mitigating circumstances, but Connor Cody, you can afford to not play Connor Cody every week. We mentioned the likes of Ayew and D. Cordova-Reid, but Simari, they played good money for. Casey McAteer, a good young player as well. So they've got strength and depth there. In terms of bits and pieces to look out for, that goal threat, 9th for goals scored overall. And of those 13 goals they've scored so far this season, 8 have been scored away from home. That's the 4th best in the Premier League. 10 away goals conceded, Ben. Not so great, though. Super efficient on their goal scoring, by the way. 19th for shots per game, but yet one of the highest goal scorer in the division. They are a bit dirty. It's not S-housing, a.k.a. Jamie Vardy ball. But yeah, 27 yellow cards, the 4th most in the division. 5 players currently sat on 3 bookings as well. So no one on the 4 bookings, annoyingly, because they take the foot off the pedal a little bit to avoid issues there. But they do get stuck in 3rd for most successful tackles per match, get blocks in, as we mentioned, with Fass. And as I mentioned, 85% of Leicester's passes are short. That surprised me under Steve Cooper. But average possession still around 40%, 46% per game. So they're not going to look to dominate the ball, but maybe they're not going to be pinging it as much as we expect either.
I've got 2 things to say to you, Rich. Totally agree. They've been pretty efficient. They're running quite hot. Their XG is 9 and they got 13 goals from it. And, the win against Bournemouth was Buonanotte coming in and pinging one in. And yeah, you can stay up like that and ride out games, but it's not massively sustainable. And I do caveat that with, we all know which side has the worst XG in the Premier League. We are aware of this. And what was the other point I was going to make? Yeah, about the passing. Rich, if you're set up to contain and then quickly pass horizontally, it kind of stands to reason. If those passes are vertical and you're staying behind the ball, then the possession can look like that, can't it? And you can still be effective. And the longer you're out of the bottom 3 and the further you're away from it, the more empowered you are to play that style of football, aren't you, to frustrate others?
Exactly right. And as you said right at the top, that strategy, we shouldn't be surprised at that under Steve Cooper. So, look, we're going to talk about us in a second. I talked about players absent and mitigating circumstances for Leicester, blimey. We could do a whole podcast on our injury situation, but we'll try and do our best to thread the needle of the Ipswich Town selection there. But yeah, we can't underestimate Leicester. As Kieran McKenna has said in tonight's interview, we're an underdog for most of the games we go into, but home team, hopefully home advantage, a big factor for us. And a couple of absentees, one for suspension in the stands, Steve Cooper, one for an injury, maybe does us a favour, who knows.
Right, get your thoughts in on the Town 11. We'll come to that after this from our partners over at Atwell's.
Blue Monday is proudly brought to you in partnership with our friends at Atwell Solicitors, your ideal legal partner for work on property or business law. Their client care has repeatedly been recognised as outstanding, and they are people-focused with a plain English approach which sets them apart. They have offices in Ipswich, Colchester and London. And to find out more, head to atwells.com.
Right, thank you to our friends at Atwells and, of course, to One Stop Badges. You can collect your discount from One Stop. There you go. Richard's showing us one there on the screen right now via the description down below this video. If you just click in on YouTube, we'll be back with the Flagship show. You can hear from myself. David Diamond will be talking about Trevor Wymark on Sunday. Joe Fairs will be making his return after, where was he, like in a holiday park or something last week. There you go. Welcome back.
New York, like Seb, by the way. I don't know if anyone is inquiring about Seb's absence. He's in New York, bless him. Who
starts spreading news, indeed.
Well, and who books a holiday during the football season? Seb Brown does. Professionalism is.
Clever. I must remember to thank him. You've got more content, although I'm sure if you're going to listen to all our shows, you'll have already listened to the brilliant Blue Monday Rewind with Craig and Dave, and the predictions where Mikey and I were kind of confident, but with no logical reason this week. So
you've got to win at some point. That's the logic, isn't it?
That's where we get into, Rich, isn't it? Law of averages. And if you can't make the game, do join up with our Telegram group. You can get a free trial over there and brilliant match day thread if you can't get to the game. People all around the world looking at it by different ways and means and chatting about what's going on at Portman Road. You can also get 4 days of free shipping in the merch store. Loads of chat still about RO Muric, Richard. I love our chat. I love our supporters. But remember, supporters are more emotional than football managers. They'll go weeks or months before the football manager does. Muric is not getting dropped here, Rich, is he?
He's not at all, I'm afraid, and quite rightly not as well. You know, all the positions on the pitch. I think you said this, Ben. The most complex for us to understand is the goalkeeper situation.
We don't, do we?
And wider context as well. I think someone posted this in Telegram. I think The Athletic, is it? Or someone has done 5 surprise Premier League standouts. And one of them is Aro Muric. So the stats kind of, I know there's the eye test and people feel nervous about it. I mean, not many people are talking about the fact that the back line hasn't been the same pretty much for any game this season. I'm a little bit of a Muric supporter. I was going to wear my Muric shirt. And I'm not going to say I'm financially invested in his selection, Ben, but I kind of am. But I just think stability is really important. And for that reason, I don't think it, given the amount of change and churn there'll be in the rest of the pitch, I think just keep it Muric as much as we
can I just add in really quickly? When I'm looking at a manager who's run out of ideas and who's probably just about to get sacked, one of the last things a desperate manager always does is swaps his goalkeepers. Yeah, it is not the first thing a manager does when they're in trouble. It is the last thing. They think, oh God, Hail Mary, I'm swapping the goalkeepers here. And we'll remember Paul Hurst doing that. And you're kind of thinking, mate, you've just tried everything now, haven't you? But there you go.
Well, so a manager that knows what they're doing as well. That's one of the first things Joe Royle did, didn't he? When he came in, brought in Paul Gerrard, didn't he, on loan? And yeah, just having some solidity there. And look, I know Muric has made mistakes, but I'm not sure it's the same mistake repeatedly. If that was the case, different story altogether. Sadly, it's different stuff, but hopefully he's learning, and I'm sure he's not going to get beaten from a long range cross again this season, he says.
What else do you, guys, get your 11s in the chat and we'll put some of them up on the screen. What else are you thinking in terms of the selection, Rich?
I would expect Delap to come back in. I thought Hurst was really good. It depends, again, on personnel here, because there is a lot of chat. Do you shove Delap out wide? I think that ship has now sailed. So the question is, what do you want to combat Leicester? And I actually think, well, maybe it is Hurst against Fast, Ben.
Do you not think Liam Delap, and we do this as football fans, don't we, has like immediately ascended to everybody's favourite? Yeah. Get him in there. He's just too hot to ignore. And I was so surprised that he was left out. But then when McKenna kind of explained it afterwards,
Hurst, of course,
Hurst played well and Delap played well. So I think switch them round now for the home game and have Hurst coming in at the end. But yeah, sorry, continue.
No, I pinned the question back to you, didn't I? So we think Delap will start. I think Amari Hutchinson was ill last week. He's trained this week, we think. So I'd expect him to play, and I'd expect him to play in that number 10 role. Again, a lot of chat about whether he plays out wide. I thought Chaplin had a decent enough game, so it wouldn't surprise me if he's a 10, and maybe you want Amari down that left-hand side with perhaps James Justin being in an unfamiliar left-back role, even though he can play there. But I think McKenna's orthodox, isn't he? Left-hand side, do you go Smodic or Clark? That's probably a debate. I don't know what you think about that one. I think Smodic deserves a start at home, doesn't he, after last week?
It's difficult, isn't it? It's really, really difficult because do you want a finisher like Smodic when we're playing in an away game at Brentford and the type of goal he scored as well at Man City? Or if they're going to be behind the ball, do you want a dribbly person who can shoot through a crowd? So I'd be thinking Jack Clark, but the shirt is Smodic's to lose, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can make a case for either of them. I think probably you're right. Maybe we are seeing a home and away variant there, and in which case we'd expect Clark to come back in. The big question mark is everywhere else, really. We definitely don't have Tuanzebe. We definitely don't have Greaves. We don't have Harry Clark due to suspension. So Leif Davis probably, hopefully, down the left-hand side. Burgess keeps his spot. Wolfen and O'Shea, I think, is probably the most logical back four. Hopefully Jens Kajust will be fit because otherwise it's Calvin Effin Phillips on his own in central midfield. So there are some challenges there for McKenna to deal with, and maybe Nathan Broadhead gets some minutes despite the fact he deleted lots of stuff off his social media and got everyone excited. Who knows?
If someone can show me that my beautiful Nathan Broadhead actually runs his own Instagram channel, then I'll pay any attention to that whatsoever. But footballers don't run their own Instagrams, do they, Rich?
No, come on. Don't read into that anything, folks. He was then pictured by the club, wasn't he? Who obviously spotted it. But yeah, I mean, Broadhead maybe can come in and do a central midfield role. I don't know, but we're lacking central midfielders, aren't we?
Yeah, plenty of 11s coming in. Give me your full 11 then, Rich.
I'm going to go Muric, Davis, Burgess, Wolfen and O'Shea, Calvin Effin Phillips, Kajust, and then I'm going to go. I think you've taught me into Clark, Avari.
No, go Smodic and I go Clark, then we've got all bases covered.
Cool.
Yeah?
We'll do that. We'll hedge everything. Amari, Burns, and then Delap up front.
We talked about Broadhead a lot, and this is again the emotional conversation versus the sensible conversation. And I love the player and just all the big moments, the greatest moments. If you look, Barnsley away has got Broadhead all over it. Southampton at home, Broadhead all over it, hasn't it? I just love to see him at least come off the bench, Rich.
Yeah, agreed. And even Coventry away game, I think he hit the bar, didn't he? And hit the post.
Scored against Norwich. I know he missed a couple of 1v1s, didn't he?
Yeah. We don't talk about that. Yeah, but, and I think the fans, and I would loop Muric in with this as well. And hopefully this is not a generalization or a little bit of a sweeping statement. But we still love the League One players, and new players, it takes a bit longer to love them. And I know Delap has scored
except Liam Delap.
We really love him straight away. And I think after last week, we've rekindled our love for KFP as well. But Broadhead's got something that not many players have in terms of finding that pocket of space, pinging a ball in. You know, the assist for Chaplin against Exeter, was it Exeter or Charlton or Wickham or something? The dinked ball over the top. He's got stuff in #his locker that a lot of players don't have, and getting him fit, I think, is a real option for us. So bring him off the bench, Kieran. Give him a chance.
Yeah, 5 subs, 3 windows. I think it's kind of a bit like what's the worst that can happen when you're 0 for 9 and coming up to another international break with Spurs away coming up as well.
And Cardiff at home, that goal from the edge of the box, didn't it? Completely changed the game. You never know when something a little bit out of the box, literally, is going to change the game.
Right. Do you want to do the fantasy league or do you want to do the predictions first?
Let's rattle through the FPL because it's an absolute joke of a feature, stupid feature. I can't even believe we're talking about it. Seb's not here. I don't even have to talk about it, but we need to shout out.
I'm terrible at it, so I'll let you lead here.
Yeah, well, so am I, seemingly as well. We need to shout out our partners at Brett Vale Golf Club who sponsor it. Lovely golf course in Constable Country, just down the A12 from Ipswich near East Berkholt. And it's still quite nice out. So do take advantage of Brett Vale, brettvalegolf.co.uk. But yeah, Seb won last week. I deployed a wild card. It didn't really work. So Seb is now leading on the head-to-head and the cumulative score. I've not made any changes this week. I've got a few injury doubts, but I'm banking a transfer for the week after next. And Seb has brought in Saka. I'm not sure. Yeah, Newcastle away. Fair enough. He's given me some words to say. What has he said? Saliba back into the starting 11 for Konsa. He's kept Palmer as captain, but thinks in hindsight he should have moved it to Salah. It won't make any difference. Seb will win next week, and we'll come back and talk about it then.
Absolutely tremendous. Right, guys, get involved. I want as many predictions as you can. You don't have to be big. You don't have to be clever. Literally, I just need a scoreline. Ipswich something, Leicester something. We'll put as many of them up on the screen as possible. I think in the predictions, I went 1-0 Ipswich and Mikey went 2-1 Ipswich, which is famous last words, Rich. Honestly, the way this season's gone, and I hate it when people do this on predictions. Would I be surprised if Ipswich won 3-0? No. Would I be surprised if Leicester won 3-0? No. Would I be surprised if it was 0-0? No. I don't think it would be like a Desmond or a high-scoring draw like the Villa or the Fulham games were. But I don't know. I think I'm predicting with my heart rather than my head. I'm going to click as many of these up as I can, Rich, and you're going to give a far more sensible, less emotional prediction than me.
No, I don't think I am. My head. I mean, we desperately need to win, but that's me wanting it doesn't make it happen. Well, maybe it does. Let's put some positives. Let's bend some spoons with Yuri Geller or something and make it happen. I don't know. The ball moved. It moved. You're right. In terms of the permutations of the game, anything's really possible. It depends how much of an injury situation we have. If we've got an unfit central midfield pair, that to me is a real problem against Ndidi and likely to be Harry Winks.
And the fullbacks as well, looking at your heat maps.
And the right side is a concern for me as well. So I think it could be high scoring. And I think our best strategy over the last few years under McKenna has been to make games open and to try and attack. And maybe a 3-3 isn't beyond the realms of possibility. I just think Portman Road effect might give us an edge. I've got to say that. Home advantage.
Rich, is this... Sorry to rain on your strawberries.
No,
is this urinate on your strawberries? Is the mixing my metaphors here? Rain on your parade. Steve Cooper's going to come, and what you just said, he's going to say, "Do not let this go loose and basketball-y." And that's my only concern. Why I've gone 1-0 and not say 2-3-1 or whatever for an Ipswich win is that the spirit of the game against Villa and Fulham, where you're kind of up and at them. Even the Liverpool game for a short while, admittedly, they could have won 4-5-0 in the end. But the spirit of those games is going to be difficult to get against a more stoic team. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be difficult to get that momentum up, which means could you just take a 50-50 game and a Leif Davis set play or something?
Yeah, I think the trouble with that is I'm not sure I'd back us to keep a clean sheet. And then we have to then go searching for another goal, don't we? Assuming we take the lead. If Leicester score first, then that is a real concern for me because they'll look to close the game down and then they'll just counter-attack against us, won't they? So in that world, you can kind of see a 2-0, can't you? You can see Leicester scoring first, us huffing and puffing, and then Vardy breaking away one-on-one. And well, maybe Muric saves a one-on-one. Who knows? But I see where you're coming from. I just think we can draw them into that kind of game, I think. But if the crowd gets involved as well, a little bit of chaos, Ben. Rain down the chaos hammer
They're
might
going to
work in
be
our favour.
so trying to prevent that, Rich, though, aren't they? I
Well,
know
Cooper
exactly.
will be up in the stands.
Totally
Ben.
agree with you. Yeah, you're right. That's a fair point as well. Rich, let me give you a horrible scenario and a nice scenario. We've got this bottom 6 shootout this week, don't we? We've got Leicester playing
Oh yeah, wow.
Ipswich. We got Wolves Palace.
You're going to say it, aren't you?
Well, let me say it both ways round then. Yeah.
And then we can think about it and at least process it.
There's one scenario. Look, teams at the bottom don't win games. So there's not going to be 3 wins in this game. There will be at least a draw in there somewhere. But there's a horrible scenario where Leicester beat Ipswich, Everton beat Southampton, Palace beat Wolves, and we won't be saying it because we're not invested in saying it, but the wider football world will say, the bottom 3 are adrift now. They're gone. Yeah. Look at them. They're not going to catch that up. The other scenario, and we won't get 3 wins because teams at the bottom don't win games and there will be a draw. But if Southampton beat Everton, Ipswich beat Leicester, and Wolves beat Palace, which would be great for the neutral, all of a sudden you have a bottom 6. Whereas if it goes the other way, you have a bottom 3. Look, it's not going to go 3 wins. It's just not, is it? And clip me out and I'll make a public apology on the Flagship on Sunday if there are 3 wins in those games. But what is your take on, the potential for match of the day, which seemed to be irritating a lot of people last week, to be saying, well, they're gone. Ipswich, Southampton and Wolves are gone. Look at the gap.
Yeah, it would be good for this band of winless Premier League teams to get that monkey off their back, because the media bloody love it. And I can see why people are getting triggered by it. By the way, highlights are on Sky on YouTube.
5 o'clock.
At 5 o'clock, folks. You don't even have to watch it. Game of the Day sometimes has our match on as well.
Rich, can I just say on another point? Sorry to interrupt you, mate. I actually asked that in the Telegram group and I was genuinely interested. I wasn't trolling. And a lot of people, it's kind of a rite of passage to watch Match of the Day, that they watched it with their father when they were a kid or something. So I get it. I must admit, you're the same as me. We're nerds. I'm there on YouTube watching I've watched all the highlights by 6:30 or whatever. But yeah, sorry, continue.
I'm the one who skips through the analysis, so I wouldn't even hear what they have to say if I watched it anyway. I think you're back to your point. Keeping as many teams in touch is as important as it gets, and therefore a win for us to drag Leicester back a little bit as well. Massive in terms of the trajectory of the season. And look, we've got Spurs and Man United with a new manager bouncing coming as well. We just got to get points on the board, and you're right. I know that we're getting a little bit antsy about the lack of wins, but I gave you a stat there. Forest at the end of the Steve Cooper era, 13 games with only 1 win in there. These runs happen, but if we were to turn it around and change that narrative and stop that conversation about being winless, I think everyone gets a lift and suddenly the momentum shifts a bit as well. We're waiting at the moment. We're chasing stuff, and that's not a nice thing for us to have.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? Use whatever language to describe the game. But Rich is totally right in that Leicester will see it as they want to keep us at arm's length by not losing, and we will see it as we want to pull them in, not to mention getting the first win with a victory. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. We thank everybody for joining us. And we need to thank David. I think that's his second super chat of the show. So big thank you to David. Thank you everyone for your support continued through the Telegram and on Twitter and in YouTube on the comments. Make sure you subscribe and hit the thumbs up. Rich, am I going to be, rinse, repeat in the same intro on the Flagship show on Sunday? Please tell me I'm not, mate, as we sign off here.
No, Ben, we're going to have, I've got nothing for you. No, I hope not. And as someone has said in the chat, we put the comment up. We've got to stay with the players as the home support. We've got to be the 12th man. And we know that Portman Road atmospheres are really important, and McKenna's talked about it as well. So my advice to everyone is jeopardy, chaos. Let's just make the game a complete basketball match. They won't like that. Maybe works in our favor. Let's win 5-4. Let's do one of those, bring it on and get right behind the players, whatever happens, because the season's not over after this game on Saturday. That's I know that I'm just trying to manage expectations here a little bit, Ben. But as we said at the top, this is not must win. It's not yet in that territory. It makes a huge, massive difference for our season and what's to come, but nothing is lost yet. There is still the possibility that we go on this run that I think all of us have a sense that we could do, Ben. I think we are one of these teams, get some players back fit. We could go on a bit of a run. So maybe, hopefully, it starts this weekend. Come on, you boys, we can do this.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here live on the pre-match show. We will be back with the flagship show on Sunday. Fingers crossed. That's a fun chat. And then into next week. We've got Rewind next week, Rich.
Yeah, Spurs. So definitely
awesome.
Some good wins.
Dave will get to make sure he gets to talk about Glenn Hoddle there in some way, shape, or form. Glenn Hoddle, Paul Gascoigne, Clive Allen, and Chris Porter will all be mentioned. There you go. I've mentioned them all.
Aussie.
Already. Aussie our dealers as well. We'll be back with the predictions on Wednesday, and Seb will be back. Rich, is that right?
So.
Next week to make the normal partnership up on this one. Rich, huge thank you for having me on the old preview show. Thank you for everyone for joining us, and we'll see you. Please let me be talking about a win for the flagship show on Sunday. Come on, Ipswich!